voting, it is also a principal part of a democracy. And I think oftentimes we forget how important voting is, and that it is one of the basic principles of a democracy. And we have people in here, including Representative Brooks, who have fought very hard, and many people have given their lives. And you've heard this before, but we can't say it enough. For us to have the right to vote. Many people in here have done that through organizations and on their own. And all we have to do really, it's painless, is to go exercise that right. Is that right? That's right. All we got to do is just go exercise the right. And absolutely, the other thing that I say to people all the time is that voting is an equalizer. There is nothing else in this world, believe me, that I can think of. It's more of an equalizer than voting, because I don't care whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether or not you're tall, whether you're short, whether you live in a castle, whether you drive the most expensive car, or if you drive the least expensive car. When you walk into the voting booth, nobody counts more than you. Because no matter who you are, you still have what? One vote. One vote. And I don't want us to forget that, because I think we tend to always say, well, my vote doesn't count, or it doesn't matter. But it does, because guess what? No one else has more votes than you, and what happens when we have those votes is that they accumulate into what? Millions of votes. And so we just need to really think about this. This election is really a referendum from my point of view, in many ways of how we think our country should go. And if you think one way and I think another way, then we need to go to the booth and register how we think. We don't need to be mad. We don't need to be calling each other's names. We just go to the booth and say what it is we believe in, and that is the American way. Amen. I also want to call attention to your attention the importance of the Secretary of State's office. People call it a down ballot, but literally it is if you take off the U.S. Senate race, it is the third office. The governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Secretary of State. And if anything happens in between that, that's the order we go in. And so the Secretary of State is an administrative oversight office, but it oversees all elections everywhere. And the Secretary of State also deals with businesses in terms of registration of corporations, etc. But how many of you have taken the exam to receive your licenses for your business in here? Can I see your hand, whether you're cosmetology, landscaper, psychiatrist, whatever? Can I see your hands high? Real estate, whatever, yes. So the Secretary of State actually does the licensing process for people to go into their own businesses and hopefully to hire other people. I want to make that process very streamlined and quick, so you can start your businesses and hire other people, hopefully, and we will increase the jobs that are in this state. I also want to partner with the governor, with labor, with industry and trade, technical adult education, so that we can look at how do we continue. The Secretary of State plays a role in making sure that jobs come, and that the Secretary of State will license that to the extent that it needs to be done. I want to talk about another part of the Secretary of State's office, and that is the one that deals with, most people don't know that Secretary of State's office oversees securities fraud. And as in predatory lending, which I helped to write and pass the toughest law in this country against predatory lending. The people who are targeted most are females. And females who continue to become senior in their years. And what they do is target you by telephone or by the mail to get you to invest your life savings and your earnings into some security fraud, stocks, bonds, or whatever. You don't hear anybody talk about that. But I want to tell you that I really want to work on that to help prevent it. We all know that an ounce is better than what? 1 ounce is better than a pound of prevention than a pound of cure. And so we want to do that as well. And I like to do that by just having people go around, experts who are knowledgeable about how to protect yourself from fraud. Maybe they could come to the center and have a class here and talk about it. So that's very important. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to close, is that we really need to talk about the truth as it appears about voter fraud. For some reason, we have two ways in which we can vote. Well, it's not for some reason, we know the reasons. But we have two different ways in which we vote that are not equal. And one is that we go to the polls and we vote. The other one is that we vote by absentee. Now, if you listen to the present administration, you would think that there are people who are at the polls who are really voting fraudulently and stealing identity of someone else to vote. I can tell y'all that is not the truth. It is really not the truth. It's another wedge issue. Amen. That drive people into a preconceived idea that just isn't true. It's been created. And I can say to you that Georgia has changed its voter ID laws simply because there is a movement on to make sure that, well, I won't say make sure, but there's a movement to set up barriers as they used to set up barriers for people to vote in this state. The real fraud happens in absentee ballots.
It does.
You have to go to the polls, you got to show what? A picture ID, you sign, you fill out all this stuff, they check your name, right? Well, you can get an absentee ballot without any ID. None.
Mail it back.
All right, mail it back in. And yet you never hear anybody talk about voter fraud in absentee ballots. And as I stand here, there are, just in the last 9 months since Kemp has been appointed to this position, and he was appointed, he is not an incumbent who's ever run for this position, there have been 6 cases of voter fraud by absentee ballot that the FBI is looking at right now. In one of them, y'all, they stole the election. It's documented. Stole the election, and instead of them, you've never heard anything about it. Instead of them, this was a sheriff race. They took the documents, took the absentee ballots, took them across the street, Xeroxed them, filled them out, and the sheriff won. Now, they had admitted to this. Instead of, we don't have any knowledge of this. And instead of giving the major punishment, they slapped this guy on the wrist with $15,000, which his attorney negotiated. And yet people would have you believe that there are immigrants and other people voting at the polls and pretending to be someone else. So as Secretary of State, I really think we have to look at the manner in which voting is done in terms of IDs. We have to require more scrutiny on the absentee ballots. I thank you for this. I'm very, very happy that you're here. I just ask that if you haven't voted, election is a referendum. That's all I have to say, it's a referendum. And we need to exercise our rights to vote. Again, thank you so much for having me. God bless you, and have a good evening.